We're going to have is team debate. Okay, so the pro team is Nathan Sharp and Gavin Lee, and the con team is Paige Snyder and Taylor Hanna. So come on up, guys. Okay, so just to reiterate, our pro team is Nathan Sharp and Gavin Lee. And our con team is Paige Snyder and Taylor Hanna. So, competitors, are you ready? All right.
Make sure it's turned on.
All right, so debaters, your round will begin in 3, 2, 1, and begin.
It is because my team and I agree with the resolution. We stand in affirmation of today's resolution on the balance that globalization is beneficial. Our first piece of evidence is that developing countries can become richer and have better economies. According to Yale Insights, economic growth is the main channel through which globalization can affect poverty. What researchers have found is that in general, when countries open up trade, they tend to grow faster and living standards tend to increase. Our second piece of evidence is that jobs are gained because of globalization. People need jobs to be successful, and with them, people stay away from debt. According to Forbes, globalization represents free trade rate, which promotes global economic growth. This creates jobs, makes companies more competitive, and ultimately lowers the prices for customers. Our third piece of evidence is that globalization creates and allows businesses to compete more. According to netavis.org, globalization affects the economy with increased competition. Competition is good because two companies can compete to lower prices, which is good for people, and it makes the products better. If two companies are competing, they try to outdo the other one, so that means higher quality for less of a price. Our fourth piece of evidence is that according to OccupyTheory.org, companies in various nations across the world are now able to trade with another. This helps the country's economy and ultimately allows them to trade with a larger audience of people. Our fifth piece of evidence is that globalization allows other nations opportunity. According to OccupyTheory.org, a nation has the opportunity to hone in on their strengths while ignoring their weaknesses. A country that is rich in oil possesses a scarcity of suitable farmland is free to focus on exporting their plentiful oil supply. And then our sixth piece of evidence is that they are able to reach more people with cell phones. According to OccupyTheory.org,
it's because my team and I disagree with the resolution. We stand in negation of today's resolution. Result: on balance, globalization is more harm than good. Contention 1. Jobs are not being created. One of the key points of pro-globalization is that it creates jobs, but this is in fact untrue. Jobs are not being created by exchange between countries. This is stated by Oswald Globalization. A North Carolina article about textile cotton mills states that cotton mills were moved to Asia because of cheaper labor. Hundreds of faithful workers were left in the dust without jobs or ways to support their family. Therefore, any relief would be short-lived and ineffective in the war against unemployment, meaning that globalization is simply putting a band-aid over a bullet hole. Nothing is solved, and the problem will only continue to get worse. Contention 2. Factory wages cause unsafe working conditions for workers. Because companies are moving to developing countries for cheap labor, they don't care about the conditions as long as work is being done. This kind of thinking can only lead to dangerous and potentially fatal hours of work that don't even pay well. Max Box, the author of Deadly Garment Factory Collapse, puts spotlight on cheap clothes, states that almost half of the population in Bangladesh lives on $1 a day. Also, the workers in a factory in Bangladesh were killed in a factory collapse. There are 1,200 people killed. This shows that the danger that globalization has put them in. Contention 3. Factory waste is being disposed of irresponsibly. Companies are already taking advantage of the workers in developing countries, but now they are harming them by pouring the factory's waste into precious water and land sources. Investigations have revealed that the dumping of industrial wastewater containing a cocktail of toxic and hazardous chemicals directly into the Siratam River, Indonesia, by American companies, including DAP and Old Navy. This is stated by www.greenpeace.org. This shows the pure, money-driven obsession globalization has created and the people it affects. Not only are factories disposing of their waste badly, they are also using resources badly. Globalization is leading to ridiculous amounts of resource consumption. This is why globalization is negative and it will harm our world.
My opponent stated that jobs are not being created, but actually, stated by Brett Schaefer in 2006, there are over 160,000 more high-tech and high-paying jobs due to globalization. They also said that it leads to unsafe working conditions, but said by Robin Meredith in 2007, the U.S. and Europe alone have poured in over $2 trillion in foreign aid to help Africa and Asia over the past half-century. Finally, he said that they don't pay well, and although they might not pay the best, it is definitely increasing, globalization is definitely increasing the wages other than what they would have gotten. For example, Suzanne Hoppo stated that per person in China before major globalization, there was $16 a year, but due to globalization over the past 30 years, that has gone from $16 a year to $2,000 a year. That is 125 times as much, or a 12,500% increase. Finally, globalization adds competition, which means the lower prices. Stated by Tom Penninger in 2007, greater competition equals greater prices and lower prices for consumers. Also, globalization introduces new technology and promotes new ideas. Stated by Globalization 101 in 2012, a new app is introduced every 60 seconds to meet a specific need. Also, globalization can increase global awareness. Stated by Helen Lambeau Born in 2005, in December of 2004, an earthquake of magnitude 9.3 hit underwater and created a tsunami. Britain was quickly alarmed and sent help to the country needing aid.
Alright, also, globalization helps reduce slavery. There are several organizations out there in the world that are based in the U.S., and like the A12 campaign, Abolish Slavery Coalition.
In your rebuttal, you talked about how a source of information was 2006, and that was 10 years ago, so I don't believe it's recent enough to be relevant to this topic. In your first contention, you talked about how developing countries can get richer, but these opportunities for developing countries are being taken from developed countries. There are no new job opportunities, there's simply an exchange of jobs between countries. Relief, if any, would be short-lived, ultimately leaving the situation unsolved. You also talked about jobs being gained in the developing countries. Yes, jobs might be being gained, but is that really worth the safety and well-being of millions of underpaid workers in those countries? You also talked about free trade, and yes, globalization might help it a little bit, but there's still so many barriers to have free trade, says the Washington Post. And also, this is from Forbes.com, the problem that is that G20 companies added more than 1,200 restrictions for import and export measures since 2008. And you also talked about competition. And competition is supposed to drive prices down, as you stated before, but it's not working because countries manipulate to get the prices, to have the price advantage, and that's from Forbes.com. And also you talked about how you can trade with another, it allows opportunity, and you can reach more people. Developed countries' government can't support these large imports and exports since they're still developing. And if it's in a developing country, there's not a lot of transportation to get around, so there's no trains, cars, or planes. So even if it's cheaper to make it there, it's going to take longer and ultimately more money to get them out to the developed countries. And also with competition, it can produce poor quality products for people because they are trying to get ahead so far that they end up skipping a couple steps, according to Thomas Friedman.
Globalization is a harmful effect to our world. Jobs are not being created. They're simply exchanged between countries. This means that any relief will be short-lived and ineffective. Nothing will ever be solved if jobs are not being created, but simply exchanged. And this is what globalization is causing. Also, factory wages are poor at best, and also they cause unsafe working conditions for workers. This means that they may have jobs, yes, but they will never be good jobs, and they won't pay well. This is stated by Max Fox. Deadly garment factory collapse puts spotlight on cheap clothes, and this says that almost half the population in Bangladesh lives on $1 a day, and these are the jobs that globalization is supporting. It is clear that the resolution shouldn't be upheld in today's debate. The evidence clearly suggests that jobs are not being created, factory wages are causing unsafe working conditions, and that globalization is negative.
Alright, in conclusion, it's clear that the resolution should be upheld in today's debate. The evidence clearly suggests that because globalization increases competition, which ultimately lowers the price that people have to pay for a product, it also helps developing countries' economy grow, which then increases their living standards, and then also allows for free trade and can reach a wider audience. Because of that, globalization is beneficial. This is why we strongly support a vote in the affirmation of today's resolution.
Globalization creates opportunities for new ideas and a greater market competition. What countries do with that opportunity is up to that individual country's decision, and it's not to the result of globalization as a whole. Globalization creates job opportunities, introduces new technology and ideas, increases global awareness, increases individual wealth of all classes, aids poor countries, and decreases prices.